Good morning. Good morning, everyone. All right, if you haven't found your seat, please do. Thank you so much. We want to get started. I'm Katie. I'm the general manager here at ADAC, and I want to thank you all for being here for day 2 of our Fall Market Discover ADAC. You're in for a real treat today, and tomorrow we have some great events for our Wednesday and Thursday of programming. So I just want to remind everyone to pick up a copy of the event guide. It's located in the back of our presentation room so that you know all that is happening this week at Market. And if you're not registered for something that you want to be a part of, just let one of our team members know and we'll help you get registered for those events. For any designers in the room, remember that we do have our market going on at our sister property, America's Mart. It's their fall market too, fall design days, and we also have their outdoor design days, which are happening on the brand new casual furniture floors that just debuted this summer. So if you want to go check out those floors, be sure to go down there. And guess what? We have a free shuttle that's running between our properties all day today. So more information is in our event guide about the shuttle times, but it makes it a really easy way to get down to America's Mart, and you don't have to deal with that parking. So take that shuttle, but remember it is for designers only. All right, this week we want you to have some fun with us on social media. Take pictures, take videos, tag us. Most importantly, tag us at ADAC Atlanta. We have a hashtag this week. It's Discover ADAC. Again, if you forget, it's in your handy event guide. I want to thank Muso Design Group for bringing us this beautiful stage decor this market. All of the product was sourced from our showrooms at ADAC. If you have any questions about any of the specific items on this stage, we do have signage in the back of the room so you can check that out. I want to thank our showroom sponsor for today. That's Osborne & Little, which can be found at Ainsworth NOAA. Don't forget that after this presentation, we're going to be going upstairs to Ainsworth NOAA, Suite 518, for a reception and book signing for Stan's brand new book. And I know all of you will plan to be there and get your hands on that book. I also want to thank our incredible media partner today, that's VERANDA. We couldn't be ADAC that we are today without VERANDA and their partnership with us. So thank you so much to the amazing team at VERANDA. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to the executive editor, Ellen McGauley.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you so much, Katie. And I want to take a moment and thank ADAC for having us. As everybody knows here, VERANDA has such a kinship with Atlanta. I mean, this is where we were born, and I always kind of think of VERANDA as kind of being born out of the inspiration that Atlanta provides in the architecture, in the design, and most of all the people. And that's all of you in here. And so we're just so glad to be here. We're right down the road in Birmingham. And I also want to take a minute and thank Osborne & Little, our sponsor. And so we'll see you all in the Ainsworth NOAA showroom after this, so we can go see all that good stuff and just kind of be able to visit a little bit after this. So thank you to both of our sponsors, and it's so nice. I feel like I'm at a rock concert right now, looking out at all. Don't take offense to this. But the Eras Tour, how you see like all these like A-list celebs out at there. So this is, I'm not saying it's a Taylor Swift thing, but this is like the Eras Tour where we have all the hot, the A-listers out here, here for you, which I can tell. So welcome to all of you. It's kind of a canned line to say he needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. You are one of the most prolific architects right now. Your star is rising so fast, and I was maybe even late to it, learning about you even 6-7 years ago, I feel like. So, but I have to say he needs no introduction because this, look at all of you here. This is Atlanta. This is a hometown architect. And so before I really welcome you, I just want to kind of go through some of your accolades and talk a little bit about what you've done. Stan is a 3-time winner of ADAC's Southeast Architect of the Year Award, 2-time winner of the ICAA's Addison Meisner Medal, which recognizes excellence in classical and traditional architecture, winner of the Acanthus Award. And in my notes, I had a 19-time winner of the Shutze Award, but now as of a few weeks ago, right? We've ticked that up to 20. So that's also a big congratulations to you on that. But I think one thing that is most resonant to me is, and that I'm really curious to kind of dig into your mind about is the endorsement that he is the architect chosen by a now quite stunning list of the nation's top interior designers for their own homes. Currently at work on Charlotte Moss's Virginia home, Suzanne Kasler, Jackye Lanham, Carolyn Malone, they're all choosing him to do his, and there's more to that. And I just think there's a lot to talk about there. There's a lot to unpack. And now he is the author of Home. And you were the very first to see it and get your hands on it. Right, Jill? Am I right about that? Yes, this is the beginning of the book tour. Welcome, Stan.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And I want to talk a little bit more about the book in a moment. But, a lot of what the reason everyone's here and the reason that the Veranda we've published, let's see, one of the first, when I first got to Veranda 5 years ago, we had a Tammy Connor project of yours that I believe is in the book.
Yes.
Here in Atlanta. We just did one in North Carolina, and we've got another one coming up in Kiowa Island, so clearly you're resonating with us. And so I want to talk about what it is that is landing so hard with the design community, with homeowners, on all of that. But before we do that, I want to trace back a little bit and see if you'll talk to us about some of your early influences and what you kind of grew up around. If you'll kind of start there.
First of all, I want to say thank you, and thanks everyone for coming. I was very fortunate to grow up in a town north of Nashville in Tennessee called Hendersonville. And this slide that you see here is the family farm that I grew up and around. And it wasn't just this sort of beautiful bucolic place, but I've had sort of a retrospect to look back and to realize that my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, my mom, my dad, they all had this incredible sense of pride of their homes and this sort of sensibility of creating beautiful, hospitable places. And that just sort of seeped into my DNA as I grew older. And I fell in love with houses from a very young age.
Did they talk about them? Like, was it in conversation, or
it
how
was
was it
in
that
conversation. It was just how they lived their lives.
Yeah.
It was, they were, it was a lot of family and also friends, and they were just prideful. And the houses, some were grand, some were more modest, but they all had a sense of soul about them. They all had a sense of self-expression. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it wasn't until later in my life that I really realized that and was able to look back on it and saw how it really influenced me in a very positive way, and I feel fortunate for that.
Yeah. So what are we looking at in some of these? Are just kind of the surrounding.
Again, these are the surrounding areas. In this area, there is a pretty incredible array of houses that were built late 1700s to late 1800s, and like these on this slide. And those were homes that I was always drawn to as a child. The one in the middle is a place called Rock Castle, and specifically I remember my mom being on a committee to do some fundraising there as a child, and I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and she would take me to that place, and I would walk around the yards and look at the details of the railings and the whole place. And so it was always just sort of a part of what I was learning and studying from a really young age, and feel so fortunate to have had that experience. And I still go back to these houses and think about them from a material point of view, proportion point of view. I didn't really study classical architecture in a way. I was just always around this type of home, and then later in my life grew to appreciate true classical architecture and studied it a bit deeper. But
yeah, because as I look at just these examples that you've put here, these aren't necessarily exceptionally Southern. They're very American, and they're very classical, and they're examples of a lot of those principles that I think we'll talk a little bit about later as well, but you kind of grew up absorbing a bit of that in Tennessee. So then tell us a little bit about how you got to Atlanta.
I came here after I graduated from college. I went to the University of Tennessee, came here after that. But I will go back a little bit further. I remember coming to Atlanta, you know, in high school ages, junior high ages. You know, my family would come here to shop, you know, going to Lenox Mall and Phipps Plaza, so from Nashville. But I would want to come and look at houses. And I remember driving around, being able to just drop my mom and dad, or my mom and her friends, off at the mall. I remember one friend let me borrow her car, and I just drove up and down West Paces Ferry and through all the streets. And
so you were skipping the mall.
I was skipping the mall.
I
didn't care about that. I was looking at houses.
Yeah.
And then it was a beautiful city, beautiful neighborhoods, beautiful houses. People really take their homes serious here, and I think that just always was a draw for me. After college, I was dating someone who moved to Atlanta, and now she's my wife, and we've been here ever since. So thank you for that. But we've loved Atlanta, and it's definitely been very influential on me. I remember first coming here, and I would go for runs or bike rides or drives around Atlanta, and just go up and down streets. And I have this sort of crazy brain where I can almost remember every house in Buckhead.
Is that right?
It's just sort of the way I am.
Yeah.
And I'm looking all the time, absorbing, looking at textures, paint colors, proportions, landscape, all of the above. So it's been very influential. And then later, working for residential firms, having the opportunity to work on incredible houses like Neil Reed, Philip Shutze, Jimmy Means, Ivy and Crook. I mean, there's so many beautiful homes, and each one was like going to a new class or grad school, as you would do measured drawings and learn what additions and what things were going to be appropriate for that house. And so I think all of those great kind of legends before really seeped in a very dynamic way.
Yeah. And
I think ultimately working for Norman Asins was huge.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that for sure. Talk a bit about that kind of, you'd gone from, I don't want to use the word passive, but you're driving past places. You always kind of had this passion for architecture, and now you're in it. And you're not just in it, but you're in it with someone like Norman Asins.
Right.
So is that an active learning of a teaching, or is this more just kind of concentrated absorption?
It's both. I think, I mean, from Norman, he's incredibly talented and informed. So I learned all of those principles of architecture, a lot about classical design from him. He approaches it from a preservation point of view and a deep understanding of American architecture specifically. But I think what I really gained from him were two things. One, the very, very important piece of collaboration between the interior designer, the landscape architect, the architect, and the client, and the builder.
Yeah.
And he is a master at that, and bringing in all of those different informed voices and bringing those people into one story on one page and really making a beautiful project out of it, and seeing the importance and how, you know, the architecture supporting the interior supporting the architecture, landscape the same way. So that was one thing I really think was huge.
Yeah, and that takes a good amount of grace, right?
Yes.
Because to have all of these different, probably very strong design voices, but doing it in a way that really makes it feel easy. That's got to be maybe not just grace, but art.
Yeah.
Right?
A lot of psychology.
Do you feel like that's something that you recognize, that like however he's doing that, that's part of the
Absolutely.
success?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second thing I think he taught me was just how to live in a house. I mean, entertaining, creating beauty, creating spaces that people, you know, are not just photographing, but they're actually living in. They're actually setting stages to have beautiful lives in. And I saw him find so much joy in that, and that also really resonated
Of the
with
livability
me.
of a
livability,
house, of finding that.
along with beauty. I mean, both can happen in the same space.
Right.
Which is really important. He also taught me a lot of things that were probably we shouldn't mention too. If you know Norman, you might know what those are.
See, that's why we should have drinks at these.
That's right.
You know, because then we get to go ahead and mention all the things we should mention.
That'll be tonight.
Right. We need a little bar cart that goes through here. It'll be great. And as you're talking, I'm watching everyone kind of watching these slides, and I want to say for a moment, these are all from the book. And I have to talk for a moment about the first time I saw a lot of these projects. Jill Cohen, who represents and is sort of the book, what should we call you? The guru, czar, all of that, right? And so we were on a Zoom call, and she was saying, and this was like a year and a half ago. She was like, he's got this coming. This is going to be great. And we're going through the projects, and I'm sitting there, and Steele, my editor, is not on this call, so all the things I was saying I had no authority to say at all. I was like, we'll take that. We'll take that one. We'll take that one. We'll take that one. And then I was like, I actually have no authority for any of that. But we want all, there was something that resonates so much, and I think, and that's one of the things I want to break down. There's no way we could ever break down that kind of secret to anyone's design. That's so much of that is so personal. But I do think what we see, and as I'm watching all of your faces watch these, look at these projects, is I think we're seeing an originality in there and an authenticity of the actual person that lives there, and that's what we kind of recognize. So in as much as we could break that down, I'd like to. So, there's something about what you do that's distinctly original and yet still balanced and familiar and all that. And so one thing I worry about with the word original is a lot of times, we talked about this, is that it's not like left field original, right? There's an alchemy. It can't stand alone.
Right. So
what are the things that you always lean on to get right before you can even worry about what you can do a little bit differently?
Yeah. Several things. I think I would start with, we approach each project as an individual project, and from a client point of view and from a site point of view. Mm-hmm. So as we are going onto these properties, whether it be a large piece of property or a smaller in-town piece of property, whether it have a mountain view or ocean view, whatever, that we really pay attention to the land, mm-hmm. the site. We have to start with that. We're not drawing a house on a piece of paper, we're drawing a house on a piece of property. And I think really listening to that and being attuned to that mm-hmm. is a lot of opportunity for originality, for creative solutions,
really?
How to deal with things. For example, one particular project, it's the one in the book called Mountain Modern. It was almost an unbuildable lot. It was very steep. It was on a golf course. It was divided by a very deep ravine and a creek. And I remember actually sitting on an airplane, doodling and drawing on top of the site plan that we had, the survey that we had. And all of a sudden I was like, well, we can't just use this half because of the creek going through it. We have to mm-hmm. use the whole property. So I said, let's drive further down the road. Let's come across the land. Let's build a bridge over the ravine to get to the house. And we created this whole other dynamic that was just really interesting. And you can't do that unless you're really attuned to the property, and that creates originality and creative solutions. Yeah. That's one piece and one example.
So there's no overstating actually where it's sitting.
Correct.
Where it's sitting and what you can draw from.
What you can draw from, the views, the trees, the light, there's so many things to think about when it comes to that. And then the second thing is we really are attuned to our clients. And not just being yes people to every one of their ideas, but really listening to what they say, what they don't say sometimes as well, looking at their pictures, their photographs, synthesizing their wishes, their list, and trying to be attuned to them and their lives. And we try to build a platform, a place for them to live a beautiful life and a beautiful home. And I think feeling those forces from our clients and then feeling that of the land and of the place, I think that's where you get, I'm not going to say originality, I'm going to use the word individuality. Mm-hmm. It's like we're designing for individuals and individuals' homes and places. And I think that's where creative solutions kind of take, and just sort of leaning into that sometimes is really important.
So I want to challenge a little bit on that, because when you talk about sitting down and listening to them, I would imagine that's part of everyone's process, but you do something a little differently. Are you kind of like, you said that you look for things that they're not saying too. Like, I want to know more about your process is what I'm trying to say.
Well, it always starts
with sneaking around into places that are showing you, like.
No, not necessarily that. But sometimes in conversations, people they're dancing around, I like red, I like yellow, I like blue, mm-hmm. but then they're showing you every picture as a white room. And you're like, maybe you don't really like red. You just thought you liked red. Yeah. So you have to dive a little deeper into their brain sometimes. And sometimes it's a scary place to go, but you can try. But so that's an example, I would say. I think our process is sitting down, interviewing, just having casual conversations with them, not just around a conference table. I think it's so important to go where they live.
Yeah.
I want to see their house, what they're leaving, what's working about it, what's not working about it. You can also go into someone's house and see, okay, they live in those 2 rooms. They haven't been in these 3 rooms in 4 years. I mean, it's sort of, you can really hear and see so much about that. And I think those are the kind of things that they're not saying, but you can get into their...
Yeah, you're not just looking at the pictures of their house. You're actually seeing how they're living in that house. And I love the part about, like, well, you say it like this, but you might actually, if you think about it like that, I think we're all a little bit guilty of that.
Yeah.
And all we have to do is listen a little bit with that and observe. So what about one thing that your materials, your choice of materials, and I think that probably starts with the site, right? It starts there. But, how do you draw from the environment? Where do you start there in terms of your materials? They're authentic,
Well, there's materials of the exterior and the interior, but both are telling a story. I mean, there's a narrative to a house that we usually try to pull from. And I think it's important for the materials, especially on the exterior, to speak to the region, to speak to the place in which it's being built. So that, again, it looks like it belongs. I think as we go into the interior of the house and seeing the materials, again, that there's a storyline. It's not like we're selecting this material to go in this room as a decorative response to something. We're selecting that because it's following the concept of the house from an architectural point of view. And I think that's so important to make these houses feel authentic and real and not, I use the word decorated. It's not just things applied to walls. It goes deeper than that. And then the house feels cohesive. It feels like it's of one story, of one voice. And I think every house should have a moment of delight in it. I think it should, there should be a surprise. There should be something that you might not expect. And
look what we have here.
Well, perfect timing. We worked on that so hard, didn't we?
Yeah, right. I mean, wait, are we the only one who can see that? Is the green room up there, or did it just pass? It just passed. Okay. Why don't we talk about that for a moment?
The green room.
Yes, the green room. This appeared in our August issue, or May, June, I can't remember. But anyway, of Veranda, that house, and that is in North Carolina. Anyway, let's talk about the green room.
So talk about delight. The client was incredibly informed, delightful, very sophisticated, and loved modern architecture. We're building a house. The husband didn't. He's very traditional. We're listening to both. We're building a house in the mountains in North Carolina on a golf course. This is the unbuildable lot, by the way, I was talking about.
Yes.
And we had to really synthesize, both of them and try to come up with something that was appropriate for them both and the location. And within all of that, she sheepishly comes to our office one day and pulls out this little piece of paper and slips it across the table to me. And it's a photograph of Yves Saint Laurent's salon in Morocco. And I had actually had the opportunity of being there years ago and actually being in that room, so I knew exactly what she was talking about. And she was like, I know this probably isn't going to work, but I've always loved this room and I would love to do something like it. And I thought to myself, you're right, this doesn't work at all. You're crazy, let's wad this up. But I listened, and I could tell how important it was to her, and we ended up putting it on the upper floor of their house and creating kind of an observatory, almost like a destination point that's a surprise. The rest of the house is very neutral. That room is obviously very colorful. And what we paid attention to some of the bigger architectural forms, the shape of the roof, but instead of plaster walls, we took it to North Carolina. We kind of dialed that button from Morocco to Western North Carolina. And we did board and batten walls with random widths. Claire in my office was so instrumental in that. And so we took it a little bit more of kind of like a craftsman, carpenter chic version of that Moroccan room and painted it the vivid colors. And it's such a surprise to go up there. We've had the opportunity to have dinner with them, and that's, where after dinner drinks are. And it's fun and delightful and whimsical. And but we figured out a balance and listened to her story and her voice and really tried to pull the best out of it.
Well, and that's something that really stuck with me, was that in the story, she said other people had said she couldn't have that room. Like, it would
That's
not
right.
go with there. And Stan said, you can have that, you know? And the other thing that I'm thinking of is that a lot of times when we're laying out stories in the magazine, if we see a room that kind of feels like not of a kind, sometimes it really sticks out in the layout, and it isn't necessarily our judgment, oh, this doesn't go, but it doesn't make it into the layout, because sometimes it's just sort of like, it begs too many questions, where
Right.
there's a lot of, this one, there was never a question of that. And so whatever the process was, and I think these are kind of unspeakable things, these are just things that that just are the skill of the designers, it made it work. So there was never question that we were going to put this in the layout, because it always seemed to go, but it was different,
Yeah.
you know? I always loved that she just kind of used, you can have that, you know? She was probably like, God, that's great. So you mentioned that you had actually been to that room. Let's talk a little bit about travel
Okay.
and the influence of that, because one thing you've said that it's in your DNA to pull from your experiences. And in talking to you, I've kind of come to understand there's a lifetime of travel that goes into all of what we're seeing here. Can you talk about the role of travel and sort of your very deliberate approach to it?
Sure. And you're right. I do find it really important for myself, and I think for other architects and designers too. There's so much beautiful out there for us to absorb and to look at and to be inspired by. For me, I have a funny story. My kids, Emma and Graham, say that it's not a Dixon family vacation unless Dad has drug us through a couple of house museums. And that is so true. All over America, and maybe a few in Europe, that we've done that. And so I seek out the places that I want to go to and that I want to see. Whether you're researching it online or you've heard something beautiful or read about it in a book, I take the opportunity when I'm somewhere and I want to go see it in person. It's different than a book. I love my books, but going into these rooms, touching, feeling them, seeing the proportions, it's really nothing like it. I think, further the story a little bit, I studied in England for a summer at the Addingham Trust, and I think that was probably a very, very important turning point for me. It's something Norman had suggested that I do, and he said it was instrumental to him in his career, and I followed his footsteps there. It was incredible. We studied the way and the life of the English country house, both the architecture, the landscape, and the decorative arts, and it was seeing all of that come together in such, not only grandness, but also some more modest houses, but there was just a beauty about it that you just absorb. And I've just continued since then to go to places both far and near to see it and to appreciate it. And I don't think you have to do the big European grand travel or go all the way to Morocco, so don't misunderstand me. I think we can do it right here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Find a place that you've never been to and go to it and absorb it, look at it. The Swan House, I mean, just one example. Most people in this room, I'm sure, have been there, but it's a treasure that is right in our back door, and we don't always take advantage of it. Or finding a small town in Georgia and walking around the square and seeing what you see, or finding. I usually try to find the old things. I'm not going to find the most contemporary house that's been built in that community. I'm always searching for the old stuff.
Yeah. Is there two questions. One, is there a favorite place afar where I shouldn't say favorite, I should say where you have taken so much from it, a certain region or city?
That was not on your list of questions.
I also wrote him, no surprises, no surprises.
The first thing that comes to mind is Italy. I mean, it's just such a beautiful place, and had several trips there over the years, and I think it's the connection of kind of the indoor-outdoor living that I love so much. The verdant green landscape, the beautiful cities, you get both in one place or one region, authentic materials, all of that stuff really resonates
the
with me.
authenticity, I can definitely see that, And so, second question is that your advice to people who are traveling in order to kind of strengthen their design eye would be to do it actively, to really
be active and
yeah.
get on foot. Don't just drive around the place. Walk around. It's a completely different experience, or get on a bicycle or whatever works for you. I always go for runs almost everywhere I
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
And I'm not really running, I'm stopping and taking pictures every 5 minutes or something, but
Yeah.
it's a great source for me. And
Yeah.
so find what works for you, but see it in a more personal way. And
That
it
makes
could be
sense.
it can be in a city or it can be in the country. It doesn't really matter. Just open your eyes.
Yeah.
Get off your phones.
Get off your phones. Yes. Yes.
Unless you're taking pictures.
Right. You talk about establishing a sense of permanence, and this really spoke to me. And a lot of what we're talking about a lot in Veranda more recently too. Steele just wrote a really lovely story about permanence and designing for permanence, and kind of a counter to the throwaway culture and all of that. But when you think of permanence in architecture, what is it you're trying to achieve? What is that?
That's a really good question and a really hard question. I gave it a lot of thought. I think every architect wants to think that their buildings and their designs and their creations are going to be around for a long,
Sure.
long time. I kind of looked back at the things that I have always enjoyed, even back to the homes in my hometown. I mean, the homes in my hometown. They'd been there for hundreds of years. Those were the ones that I was drawn to. Those were the ones that really were impactful to me. And then even, again, going back to our story of Atlanta and the Reeds and the Schutzes and the Jimmy Means houses, they were built well. They are respected by other people. People who are buying these houses are doing it as a steward to the art and the architecture. And I think it would be wonderful to think that our houses are being thought of the same way one day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It has something to say?
It has something to say, and it has something to say for a while. It's not just a moment. It's not a flash.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we try hard not to follow trends in our architecture in our office. We are open to modern ideas and contemporary thoughts and even more modern edited aesthetics, which you do see in the book. But everything is steeped into classical proportions and traditional ways of building. And I think there's a longevity to that's just honestly being responsible to our planet and who we are. And also designing historically is also in a lot of ways really green. If people really look at it, this is off topic, but houses were built ways to deal with culture and climate.
Climate, for sure, yeah.
You had steep roofs where it snowed a lot. You had shallow roofs where it didn't. I mean, these things are not just stylistic ideas that are out there. They meant something to people. So I think when you're building a house, you should think of it as something for a long period of time and take those decisions with a lot of respect.
Like perhaps if designing in a way, it always fascinated me. I lived in Charleston for a while and so knew how they designed those houses for the breezes and for the air. You know, there was no air conditioning. You know, and I think about
tall
that.
ceilings to let the heat out.
Yeah, and I think about that. I would be really grateful for an architect to say, you know what, someday these things might not all work. You know, you might have a summer where things go wrong. We've thought of that. You know, I don't know if we can do that in Alabama. Like, I don't know if we can really fix that in Alabama. But I know, I think that I have a good appreciation for those things that just make sense. You know, for the way that we live, if they're supposed to be livable. So, you know, I wanted to talk a bit about the process. We were just talking about this before this talk, of the process of writing the book and what that has done for your design eye, your thoughts, your sense of who you are as an architect, perhaps?
It was an incredible experience. I mean, it's so informing to me as an architect and I think to our entire firm to sit back and look at the work that you've done over the past 15 years and to look at this body of work. And it's very diverse, and you definitely see that in the book, and I kind of explain the reasons why that diversity exists. But I didn't really understand and know that until I took the time to do the book and look at the pictures and to think about, what am I going to write about these houses? How did we come up with these decisions? And so it was informative in that way, and I think it also was very informative in taking the time to go back and photograph all of these houses. And this doesn't these photographs don't happen in a day. This is 3 and 4 days in every house where we're micromanaging every little trinket and shadow line and waiting for the sun. And it's a lot of work, and it's also really rewarding, but the real reward, I think, was being in these houses for an extended period of time and seeing the sun change, seeing the view, sitting on their porch eating a mediocre sandwich, but looking at an incredible view that you knew why you gave them that view.
Yeah.
It was a lot to take in, and I'm really grateful to have had that experience.
And the owners had, in a lot of these, I guess, had been in the houses for varying amounts of time.
Correct.
At this point, right? And so you were kind of watching how they were finding their way around and living in the houses. Was it surprising at all, or was it gratifying?
It was gratifying because I would say most of the houses I felt like all of the rooms were used, and that's that's a true
right?
I would think a compliment to what we're trying to design. But I mean, some of the houses were full of kids and families and dogs, and some of them weren't. But you saw that the houses responded to their particular lives and what they were doing in their locations. Some of them were primary homes, some of them were second homes, so those live very differently, of course. Yeah, it was really fun.
Well, what about, and sorry, this wasn't on your list either, but what about working with some of the designers on their own homes?
Okay.
With that, so. Not that anyone's
Where's
in this
the
room
door?
or anything like that. Right. But I'm just going back and thinking about the Norman Asins kind of collaboration of bringing all of these people together, and how that must be almost just amped up because you're really talking about livability. That's very personal at that point. That's very personal. Is that different than doing, I don't know, their design, designs for them, but not necessarily their own homes?
Right. No, I think the opposite. Jokes aside, it was rewarding. I mean, I think of Jackye Lanham's house as being one of the really great examples of that, where we created a very strong narrative and story to this house on Kiowa Island that was not a house. It was a stable, and it was supposed to be a renovation, even though it was all new construction. But Jackye and I were on the same page and really fed each other in our ideas, and even how we wired the walls to have exposed conduit, because it would have had exposed conduit because it wouldn't have been inside the wall, because I mean, we got kind of crazy. But it was fun. But I think someone that has the knowledge of architecture and how the architecture can support the interiors and vice versa is a real gift, and that's when houses really get special, I think, is when you have that strong collaboration and you're telling a really strong story. And I also think designers-owned homes tend to have a little bit more soul and personality to them because it's their own collections of things and the things that are important to them. And I think that definitely shows through, of course, in Jackie's house. So.
Yeah. I'm sorry that I hear that you all really broke it down last year, I think at ADAC, right? I'm sorry I missed that. That sounds really special. So I think we're gonna start Q&A pretty soon, but one final question for you, and that is, what does every house need to be successful?
A really good housekeeper.
My house is not successful. My house is not successful.
I think I think stereotypical answer is light. And I personally like houses like this image with a lot of light. But I think it's not just the daylight coming in. I think it's also the light in the evening. Houses that are lit well, lamps, things that are warm, comfortable, things that make you feel good, make you look good. Those are the types of spaces that people want to be in. So I would say light is probably pretty high on my list. For me personally, I think two sort of attributes that I would want in a house, and it's seasonal, because in the winter and the colder months, I want a really great fireplace. I want to hear the crackle of a fire and the smell and have that ambiance. And then in the warmer months, again, going kind of back to my childhood and spending so much time outside and in a lot of these houses that my grandparents and aunts and uncles owned, there was this incredible indoor-outdoor living and spending time on porches. And I think in the summertime, having a great place to dine and eat al fresco is like top of my list as well. So
yeah, that means you're living well.
that's right.
Just eat outside.
Exactly, and have a fire in the winter. You're doing everything right.
Yeah,
So.
they're all atmospheric, which really speaks. I always said like kind of I'm an atmospheric eater. Like I'll go to a restaurant, you can give me cereal, it's fine, as long. But if I have all the right, you know, if it feels good, then and that a lot of that is lighting.
Yeah,
a lot of that is lighting.
No
cafeteria lighting in restaurants. Stop it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so so I think my takeaway there is it's very much about atmosphere, which is not something you can put your finger on, but you can kind of point to some of the things that can create.
And I think the things I probably didn't say is, you know, I very much like classical proportions, timeless design.
Yeah.
And that's something that we use in all of our work. Our decisions are based on things that have worked in the past, beautiful proportions, even though it might be more edited or more ornamented, whatever type of house we're doing, there is a backbone to it that I think keeps it being timeless and aesthetically especially. So that's really important to our whole office.
Yeah. And I think too, I mean, it's funny that we kind of are ending here because that's one of the first things we started with when you and I started talking about this panel was scale, proportion, getting that right, thinking outside of the box after that.
Know the rules and then break the rules.
Right. Well, I suspect you may have sort of a degree in psychology in there somewhere as well, because I do think that part of the originality, the authenticity, the individuality comes from what we talked about earlier and being able to listen and reflect the owners in their homes.
Yeah.
You know, and that kind of ends up resonating with everyone, even though it's very individual.
Yeah.
So. Let's open it up to questions. Katie has a microphone, and that way, this is being recorded, so that way we'll be able to hear. We have one up here. Marianne.
Yes. I will run quickly. Thank you. I mean, Stan, first, congratulations.
Thank you.
Exquisite. I can't wait to get my hands on the book. So congratulations to you and your team. I have a question about process, which I'm interested in. I mean, the landscape that in your projects is spectacular as well. And so I'm curious as to how early you fold that in. You make it really episodic. Do you work with landscape architects? Do you handle that yourself? It's just beautiful, and it's an extra layer of attention to detail.
Yes, when we're doing a schematic design, I play landscape architect. I'm drawing the retaining walls. I'm thinking about the heights, the elevations, where the pool is going, where guests are parking, where the homeowners are parking. It's very important, the sequence of someone coming off of a road, getting out of their car. How do they walk to the front door? What does that experience look like? It makes it more interesting to me, and I think that starts with the landscape. And we do work with incredible landscape architects. I think just like a part of that collaboration, Marianne, to me it's us being on the same page. Sometimes they tweak and change our ideas and make it better, but it's still that conversation that happens, and they're not designed in vacuums. They're designed together.
I have one over there.
Making me run. I'll get there.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
I have a question regarding the role of interior design and landscape design, and how many times as an architect you're actually working in contributing to the wellness of your clients, especially when, you know, a lot of these play into role when we talk about art and design and how they actually establish a form of mental and emotional wellness for your clients and how they want to perform this in their residential living spaces. But I wanted to know, as an architect, how have you found yourself grappling with your own wellness and having balance with your own artistic wellness with your client, with the clients you work with? How have they taught you about things about yourself as an artist?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Not sure I'm the right person to ask. I think it helps that I love what I do, so work does not feel like work to me. I really enjoy it, and I enjoy my office and the people within my office. We have a great time. So I do work a lot, but I'm also having a lot of fun at the same time. So I think that helps contribute to my own wellness. How my clients have informed me, I see them wanting to create places that are restful and peaceful. I think in everybody's life, they're so busy, they're running around. And it doesn't matter if they're retired or have 3 small kids. It's everybody's wanting the same thing out of their house. They're wanting peace. They're wanting a place they can lay their head. They're wanting a place to enjoy their friends and family and entertain. And I think if you can provide a beautiful place for that to happen, that's the best thing we can do as designers and architects. That's what it's ultimately about. It's not making the big statement or the big design, and I think seeing how they are doing this big project, they're spending all this money to help themselves in their lives and I think their overall wellness. So that is inspiring to know that people find it important.
Anyone else?
I have a question off of the landscaping one, which is about shooting your projects. I mean, when you went back to shoot some of these for the books, obviously the landscaping was in, and that had to be really gratifying. Part 2 of that is you wait to shoot, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You really like the vines growing up that house. We probably
Yeah.
waited 3 years before we.
Just sort of at the edge of your seat, just
Right.
waiting to get in there, right? Because
And we shot it.
takes patience, I'm sure.
Jill was about to kill me because we were shooting this house at the very last minute, and our Rizzoli was about to kill us. But I had to get one more in.
Where is this?
This is in Atlanta.
Okay.
Suzanne Kasler.
Okay.
And it's important. When I started the whole book process, I said, first of all, I want the projects to feel very whole. I want them to express the collaboration between the design professionals. So I wanted the interiors to be strong, the architecture to be strong, and the landscape to be strong. I felt like it needed all 3 of those before you spent the money and the time to shoot the house. And the landscape definitely has to be mature. The interiors, I actually think, get better with a little age too.
I do
They
too.
just don't feel so stiff. I think they look better when they've been lived in, and the sofas are a little wrinkled, and it's a minor detail, but I do think it makes a difference.
Yeah, I agree.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It is amazing. It's so much fun. It's like birthing, right? It's like a baby. Yes, it's so great. So my question is, because majority of the audience are designers, what advice would you give the audience in collaborating with designers that benefit the client and the project to be the best it can be? Like, as an architect, what is important to you as designers in us working with you?
It's a great question.
It is a great question. I think communicating, talking, don't wait to have meetings with the client. Have meetings with each other. Think about the furniture layout, the scale of the room, the lighting plan. I think just communicating, talking to each other, being creative with each other, putting egos away. It's not about, is it the architect's idea or the interior designer's idea in our office. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea. And I think the mutual respect, if the designer says, no, I don't think that's going to work for whatever reason, the architect needs to respect that, and vice versa. So I think it's just being open and talking and giving yourself room to be creative. I think without having the client right there on top of you is important. And that's different. Some clients are great and a huge part of the creative process. Some clients just want it to be presented to them. So you need to read the room there. So maybe it's okay to have the clients, maybe it's not. But does that help? Communication, yeah.
Communication is key.
Anything else? Any other
I
questions?
feel like there's a lot from this side of the room. What does this side of the room have?
We have one over here.
Many of us in this room have had the pleasure of working with you, so thank you as a designer. I'm curious, like, if you could pick your next dream project, could be anything, what would it be? Didn't say anything about which designer. Just said.
I think it would be really fun to, of course, a house, because I love houses, but to do some houses in the Caribbean and some of the islands, I think would be really fun. Really embracing kind of the Anglo-colonial styles would be something fun to explore. So that's an annuity too. Right, it's an annuity. Good business mind there.
Plenty of indoor-outdoor there.
Yeah, exactly.
The house you just won the Shutze for, what is that house built on? Like, is it above the ground? Can
Yes.
it flood completely?
It is in a floodplain. So by code, we had to raise that house up almost 12 feet above the grade of the original soil. And we didn't want it to look like a raised house. That was not the goal. So we actually just brought in lots of dirt on the front side of it, the approach side of it. And we actually mounded it. I don't know if you're familiar with Middleton Gardens near Charleston, but it had these beautiful terraced grass lawns that kind of stepped up to what used to be the house. So we used that reference and that inspiration to do these terraced lawns that kind of roll up to that house. It's built on concrete piles that go deep into the earth. I mean, they drilled piles forever before they could start constructing that house.
Is it septic?
Is it septic?
Like a septic tank? There's no...
Yes, it is.
Anything we have to look forward to?
Oh, wait, hold on. I got a microphone. You cannot talk without me giving you that microphone.
Are there any projects you're really excited about that we have to look forward to for inspiration?
I will say Charlotte Moss is moving into her house today.
Oh, wow.
So that's really fun. She was going to be here, but it didn't work out. She will certainly get that out there in the world for people to see. It's beautiful. We have some incredible projects in Cincinnati that we're working on. We're starting a new project in Vail, Colorado, which will be really fun. And I really enjoy working all over. I mean, Atlanta's fantastic. I love working in Atlanta. People love their homes here. But I think it's really fun to travel and work in different places too. So love the opportunity to do that.
Any final questions? Okay.
No.
Stan, the book is actually beautiful, and I've already expressed that to you. I feel like you had such a great team on this book, and there's a real consistency to it. And the pictures are all unbelievably fabulous, but there's a lot of variety because of the different styles and the different designers. And I felt like I wanted to know I know what your approach is, but I want you to share it with everybody in the room and how you and Shannon decided how to go about this book with Jill.
Well, Jill was a great champion and a great leader. And I was a good student. I listened to her. When we started this, she advised me it would be really good to have one photographer do the entire book and to see it through the lens of one camera. So we really did a lot of research on what photographer to use. It was Eric Piasecki, who was phenomenal. But what I liked about his work is from an interior point of view, he was really able to grab depth and connections between rooms and spaces. It wasn't about vignettes. It was always you were seeing into another space. So I think a reader could really understand and put the floor plan together as you look at the photographs. And then I think as an architect, I wanted the exterior photographs to be beautiful as well. And that's really, I think, a totally different mindset. And he was really able to pan out and get the sense of place and the trees. And I worked really closely with him. I mean, I was kind of hanging over his shoulder at every photograph. And I think that made a difference. I know some architects don't take the time to do that, but I was right there by his side. Shannon was there. Emma, my daughter, was there. We had a great team. And we also used a stylist, Helen Crowther. She and Shannon both styled all the photographs. And Anita Sardis did one project as well. So that was my approach, and I think it helped because the work was so diverse, Jackye. I felt like the way it was photographed needed to be that thing that kind of tied it all together, and I hope that showed through.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's a great lesson in putting together these portfolio of work, this body of work.
And there are thousands of pictures that aren't in the book that we don't know what to do with. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, I think, thank you, everyone. And Congratulations, Stan.
Thank you.
Thank you so
It was
much
fun.
for being
Thanks
here.
for coming.
And thank you, everyone. Great. We'll see you at the showroom.
Okay, so remember, we'll go upstairs to 518 Ainsworth Noah to get our copies of Stan's book and for a reception and to ask more questions of Stan. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Katie.